Good morning, everybody. Welcome to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment. As always, if you're watching not live, you want to skip past the morning good mornings, just scroll down. There's going to be a little time code down there, or just scrub ahead. So today we are picking up where we left off with this whole big adventure on what my live broadcast YouTube live streaming setup is. But before we do that, of course, we're going to say good morning, because there's a few people in the chat room already. Good morning, Sully. Good morning, Faked Cube. And wow, it's actually, that's like it this morning? Yeah, you guys are just done with this whole live broadcast thing. You figure, too much, I don't even care anymore. I don't want to know. Well, somebody out there, I'm sure, wants to know what's next. So we're going to pick this up where we left off and just move right along. So since there's not that many people right here, I think we're just going to jump in and go. Oh, look, there's another one. Adrian, good morning. Imagine most from the UK stuck in traffic jams or down at the pub. It is Friday evening, isn't it? I would imagine that's a far more fascinating place to be than learning about live streaming. All right, let's just do this thing, shall we? Good morning and welcome to PhotoJoseph's Photo Moment, the first live daily photo show on the YouTubes every weekday morning, 9:30 a.m. Pacific. As always, watch live because it's fun. And you get to chit chat and tell me that you're about to go have a beer when I'm just starting my day. Whatever, UK. So let's, London tuning in. Excellent. John is here too. Super. So over the last couple days, we've been going through this massive progression of what this is, this whole live studio madness. Starting, of course, with all these sources, the cameras, the computers, the iOS devices, and so on, and the device that they feed into, the ATEM 2ME. That was the majority of day one, class one, session one, whatever you want us to call it. Yesterday, we talked about lighting, set design, and sound. We even talked a little bit about the makeup part, because that's kind of an important part of lighting and the set. And today, we are going to be looking at the software that controls the ATEM, which therefore controls all the switching. And we're going to talk about the local capture, and we'll talk about the encoding process, how it gets out to you all. So let's start with the software, because that does make sense. As always, if you're watching live and you want to get my attention, you've got a question for me, make sure you @PhotoJoseph in the chat logs so that I can, in the live chat, so that I can see that. And of course, if you really want to get my attention, there's that little $sign, the little super chat thing you can click on, which is always cool. And if you're not watching this live and you want to contribute to the show, please go to PhotoJoseph.com/Patreon. That's my Patreon page, and throw a nickel in the tin, as it were. All right, so let's take a look at the switching software. Now, this is going to be a little bit tricky because if I switch something, you'll see the switch. So I can show you the interface and explain and point to things, but I can't actually do the switching or you wouldn't see the screen anymore. Make sense? Good. I'm glad you're along with me for this ride. So let me go back to the default page on this and switch over. So we're looking at this on my Mac. Now, one of the really cool things about this switching interface is that this is IP based. So I go into my, that'd be the wrong place, go into the preferences somewhere in here, and there we go, there's the IP address of my switcher. So what that means is that I can, let's do it like this, what that means is that I can actually control the switcher from any system on the network. This is why I can trigger things from the iPad, and I will show you that. We'll get to there, but we're going to start on the computer because that's where the software really is. Or if this can be controlled from any computer around, and it can actually be on multiple systems at once. So multiple people could be tying in and controlling it, which I'm sure would get really confusing, but it's possible. It can be done. Also means you can have a backup, right? Which is great. You could have side-by-side systems, so if one just suddenly goes, bleh, the other one is there and ready to go instantly. There's no logging in or anything like that. And my buddy Chris Fenwick has tuned in just to say, can you show me everything from the beginning? I can. All you got to do is go up here, click on the thing that says show me the previous shows, and you get to see it. Chris. Yeah, it's people. Some people. Okay, so let's go back to this. So this is the main interface. Kind of a funny thing. Very old school looking, right? You know, you get the big old knobby buttons. It even looks like the big old knobby buttons of yesterdayore, these big, huge, clicky things. And they all look the same. A couple little colors on there, and that's it. And I gotta say, as someone who didn't come from the broadcast world, looking at this to me is just insane. I get that you've got a lot of people, like my friend Chris Fenwick, who's really old, who will have spent a lot of time in this world, and making the transition to digital, it's very comfortable to have this. But man, this could be so much better. So that's just yet another shout out to Blackmagic. Not that they haven't heard it about 1,000 times. Come on, guys, give us an interface that makes sense for normal people. This is crazy. But it is what it is. So it is what we have to deal with. All right. what we're looking at here is, you notice up here there's two buttons. Now, I don't want to give you I'm not going to give like a full-on massive tour of the entire interface. I'm just going to show you the key components that I use, but I'm going to give you a little kind of a hint behind the curtain so you can see just how much, Chris is now reacting to my old statement, just how much does happen behind the scenes in here, what you can get into. But you'll see it says Mix Effects 1 and Mix Effects 2. They're two completely different output interfaces, and if I make the screen big enough, it actually shows all of them at once. Frankly, this terrifies me. I don't know why nobody wants to look at this. Let's just make this a little bit smaller. It's kind of cool. As I change the size of this window, it gets big enough and it goes, oh look, I'll give you more buttons. So all I need is what's down here at the smaller size, so we'll just leave it at that. At the bottom you have a preview, and at the top you have a program. Now, one of the things that, let's see here, I'm going to switch back to this camera for a moment here. One of the things that I have is a display here, which I think, did I turn that camera on? I did, it is still on. If I go here, you can see this guy right here. This is my, what's this thing called? I always forget what this thing's called. Something Duo. This is called a SmartView Duo. So the SmartView Duo has, you can see the cables running into it down here. That has two outputs coming from the switcher, the big ATEM box on the top, and this has two screens on. I'm going to show you the screens in just a moment. One of those screens shows the program out, so what you see, so that's my monitor that I know what you're seeing. And the other one shows all the preview windows, and I can control what preview windows I want to see in there. So let me switch this. Let's see here, if actually I can get this keyboard out of the way, and I'll actually get this all set up in advance, and I'll switch over to be a nice clean switch, in theory at least. All right, let's do this. Switch to that. Make sure my audio didn't go on. There we go. So there's that switching screen. So you can see what I've got there. Two monitors side by side. One showing all, well, not all, but I can choose up to 8 of the inputs to look at once, and I can program that however I want. And I can name these, like that says BMD Micro, that's the main camera. That says Demo, that's this Mac up here. That says Chat, that's the chat window that would be a video chat if I was doing that. That's my computer screen. That's the wide camera, it's called Remote GH4, that's the remote camera. That is this source, that is this HDMI source. And then here, I'm looking at the chat feed, so if I am doing a video chat, I can control what the person on the other end sees. They can see the same thing as the program, or I can have them see something else entirely. And that's a media player. That is a still store. That's a place for me to store an image that I want to show and call up at any time. So I see that. So at any point, I can glance down and I can see what sources are available. This is how, when you've seen me do things before, I plug in an iPad and you'll see me looking down there going, okay, wake up, come on, connect, and then I see it connect, okay, now I know it's a viable source. Or like just now, I said, oh, is that camera on? I look down there and I see, oh yes, it is on. So that was the Remote GH4. I know that that is actually on because I can see it down here. So I have that view there. That view, of course, is mimicked up here, but without the preview. It's just the buttons. So I said preview and program. Those are the two big screens that we have on here. If I go back to my switcher and you look at that, up here we've got the program. That's what's actually being broadcast. So you see right now it says demo because that's what you're seeing. You're seeing this, the demo Mac. And then down here it says preview. So preview, the idea is if you were doing a live production and someone else is doing the switching, they could build the next shot. So they could pull up a single camera, or they could do a camera with an overlay, they could do picture-in-picture, they could build all of that in the preview monitor, the preview window. And then once they're ready for that to go live, they hit the switch and it switches over, it pushes that to the live feed, to the program out. So they would be doing that. I obviously can't do that while I'm talking. I can't go into the preview, set up a preview, add a layer, choose the dissolve that's going to happen, and do all of that. So I have to script all of that so that I have a series of macros, one button touches, that will do any number of things. And that part right there, this is why the ATEM is so incredibly powerful. Also why it's so incredibly complex. But that's what it is. So let's go back to this view. So I've got to hear the preview. So if I click any of these now, I'm seeing this change on my screen on the left-hand side. I'm seeing what's happening there in the preview monitor. But what you're seeing is what's up here. So again, if I click one of these, you're going to see it change. And I can choose what kind of transitions I'm going to have, different transition styles. I can actually do a slow transition. So there you can see that fading from one camera to the next as I slide that up and down. Or normally I would just hit auto and it would just go. And then over here, I've got my keying controls. I have super source control. Super source control allows me to put up to 4 pictures at once in the screen and crop and scale them however I want in here. So you can see all of this part of it in there. And I can have overlay art and just all kinds of stuff in there, right? I can just really control it. And then, let's see here, we can skip past that part. And then down here at the bottom, we've got my media control. So I've got 4 tabs to this: switcher, media, audio, and camera. So let's go to the media one. And this shows all the media that I have currently loaded up and ready to go. So for example, this is these are, well, there's some duplicates in here, but this is basically my still store, and you can see it's stored over here, and this is what is ready to go. So if I hit a button, like right now I've got it set up so I can hit a keyboard shortcut that will bring up that still store. And what it just brought up was what was stored right here. So if I was to grab another thing and drag it into there, so I've dragged that into place there, I hit the same button that pulls up the media player, and there's that image, and it's all in place. I have things like up here, this is an animation. So you've seen, I just switched to this main camera in, I forget the timing, 30 seconds or 15 seconds or so, you're gonna see a thing pop up. There it is. So that just popped up on the bottom. That is a little animation that I built in Motion, build it in After Effects, whatever you want. And then you have to export out a frame sequence and then import that in. And I have, through macros, I've controlled it so that when I switch to this camera, after the delay, whatever, 20 seconds or some, whatever it is, it triggers that animation. That animation starts, and that animation lasts for 360 frames over the course of a 24 frame per second show, and that pops up, does its little animation, and goes away. So that's completely macro. That's why every time I switch to this camera, I used to have the lower third on all the time, and for one, people complained that it was annoying and in the way, and two, I realized when something is there all the time, no one sees it. It's always there, it may as well never be there. This way, whenever I come back to this camera, it's something that pops up. So it's just like visually, obviously you're gonna see it as the audience, it's there, but it's not all the time. So, and there are shows where I never leave this monitor, so I might, if I go, oh, I haven't played that in a while, I can reach down and hit that, and you don't see anything happen, right? Because I'm already on this camera, but it has just started that macro over. So it switched to this camera, even though it was already there, and then in 20 seconds, whatever it's going to be, my pop-up is going to pop back up. Okay, so there it is. All right, so let's see here. So that's the basic graphics. We don't need to go into any more on the graphics there. Next up is the audio tab, and this has all my audio level meters, and you can see every input on here. You can see most of them I'm not using, and what the audio levels are set at and whether they're turned on or not. So for example, XLR, that's the primary input. There you can see it bouncing when I talk. This is what is coming off of the mixing board. So that was yesterday's whole show. I showed you the big mixing board, all the dialogue coming through there. All of that, all microphones feed into the XLR input on the ATEM, and that is my master audio input from the microphones. If I go back to this view here, you'll notice things like this GH4 remote, GH4R, that's my remote camera. It's picking up audio because it has a built-in microphone, but I have this turned off, so it's not on right now. Same thing with the GH5. This is plugged into the HDMI port. That is hearing me, but it's off. And if I turn this on, you're actually going to get an echo because you're hearing me through 2 cameras at once. So obviously not something we want. So there's that. Then you've got the demo. So if I was to play sound from this computer right here, you'd hear it. The chat system, if someone's talking, you'd hear it. And then this one actually doesn't need to be on. The BMD, the Blackmagic camera, that doesn't need to be on. It just is, but it doesn't need to be. And then the camera control. Now this is only relevant for the cameras, the Blackmagic cameras, right? That is only going to be relevant for that camera. So I have control over this, and I did a whole show about this. We'll link to that up here because that was really cool. It was a whole kind of behind the scenes of how this camera works with the color controls. But just to, let's see if I do this, and let me make this nice and big full screen, and close that and open this. You should be able to see it. Yeah, you can see it there. So I'm going to very quickly just copy this to my clipboard so I can change it again. And now if I go in here and I move this around, you can see I am controlling the colors in here, the color for the lift, gamma, and gain, and so on. So I have complete control over all of that. It's not exactly subtle. It's a little bit of a task to get it right, but it is in there. Which reminds me, total side note, the sparkles that you guys were seeing on my face over the last couple of days, I went back through the archives. Turns out that's been on there since April 4th. So thanks for telling me sooner, guys. I haven't figured out why it happened, but I fixed it. All I did, I was playing around in here and I just messed with the lift, and as soon as I touched the lift controls, it went away. I started playing with the contrast, hue, and saturation. I don't even know what made me think that it might be in here, but I was just wiggling sliders, and then as soon as I touch lift, it went away, and it hasn't come back, as far as I know. So by all means, if you're seeing it, I really, really need to know, because this was a total bizarre issue. So don't be shy. If you see white sparkles, it turns out it was on my end, not on YouTube. I want to know about it. All right, so that's that control. So like I said, we've already done a show on that. We don't need to go through the whole thing again. Let's see here. Let's get out of this full screen one. Oops. Oh, while I'm in here, I should show you this. So up here at the top, you know how I mentioned that the chat feed can show whatever I want? So that chat feed, normally it would be set to program, let's see, the ME1, so that's the mixer 1, program out. So that's, the chat feed is now seeing the same thing that you guys would see. This is Wirecast. This is what is being fed out to Wirecast, and that always has to be set to program 1. If I change this, then what you see, because it's being encoded through Wirecast, will change. So I got to be careful of that one. When I had the scopes hooked up, I could send out the scopes, and I have, as you can see, 6 auxiliary outputs, and I can control each of those to show a different thing or the same thing that is showing up on your screen. So I have total control over all of that. And then there's the macros, and that's where this really sings. Now, before I jump into macros, let me just quick scroll back through the comments here and see what's going on, other than Chris complaining about being old. Let's see here. Max, good morning, Max. Good to see you, buddy. Great info on the lower third. I was going to ask about it. Well, there you go. Very cool. Good to see you, Max. And for everybody who's wondering, Max and I will be releasing video very, very soon. Daniel Hoitlink, I gotta get glasses. It says, for first time live, but seen them all. Oh, thank you. Really good stuff. Hope to get my GH5 tomorrow. Greets Daniel from the Netherlands. Excellent. Excellent. Hello to the Netherlands. Fake Cube saying no sparkles today. That's fantastic. And Ryan Green took away Max's power. Man, that was harsh, dude. No more power for you, Max. He's talking about the admin power over the chat. Okay. So macros. So I remember all of this I can't possibly be controlling while I'm live on the show. Therefore, macros. Now, the way macros work is really kind of funny. Oh, shoot, hey Ryan, bring me another battery for the GH5. They're plugged in the side here. This one's about to croak. The way that macros work is you hit record. Thank you. You hit record, and it starts recording everything that you do. So that means if I hit record and then I switch to camera A, we'll call this camera A, that's recorded. I build in a pause. I have to build in the pause, but I build in a pause, switch to camera B. It's going to switch to camera B. If I go into the preview room, the preview area, and I load up camera A, I put on a lower third, I do an animate graphic, whatever, I do build all that, and then I hit send to program. All of that is recorded, and it happens instant. It's instantaneous that it would happen, but that all happens as part of the macro. So you think, okay, well, that makes perfect sense. So if I want to build a macro that does this, I just hit record and do it. The thing is, and this is what makes macros so challenging yet simultaneously so powerful, it only records what you actually do. So that means, let's just say that when I start recording my macro, I have this audio turned on. Okay, this audio's on. And then I switch over to another camera. Well, I don't want this audio on anymore. I have to turn this off. Okay, well, that makes sense. I know I got to turn it off, so I turn it off. But now let's say that this isn't on, right? And I record my macro. So I record my macro to switch to this camera. But I haven't explicitly said in the macro, turn off audio from this camera. Why would I? It wasn't on in the first place. But then if I'm doing my show and I have this audio on and I trigger the macro to go to this camera and it doesn't explicitly tell this camera to turn off the audio, this camera's audio doesn't turn off. So do you see what's happening here? You have to explicitly tell it what to do, and if you don't, then it doesn't do it, which means anything you've done before that is still there. So if I was to go in and do a color change on this camera and then trigger a macro that switches to that camera and that switches back to this camera, that color change is still going to be there because I haven't explicitly said in the macro, change the color back to what it was. So this makes building what should be seemingly simple shortcuts extremely complex because I have to go through line by line of the code, and I'm going to show you this, and make sure that, for example, when I switch to here, this audio is turned off if I want that off on every single preset. Because if I'm going to, here's another example. Let's say that I'm doing a live chat, right? And I've got someone here. Obviously, when I switch to that camera, that source, them, we want their dialogue to be on. We want their audio to be on. So I explicitly tell the system in a macro when switching to this video source, and when I'm pointing to the TV, meaning that's my chat. So I switch to this video source, also turn on the audio. Okay, good. But then I switch away from it. I don't necessarily want it to turn off because maybe I'm having a dialogue and now I want to switch over to something else to show them something or show the audience something else. I don't want their audio to go away, so I don't explicitly turn that off. But that means when they hang up, that audio source is still hot, which could be a problem because maybe somebody else calls in, it rings, whatever. Any number of things could happen. So I have to explicitly tell it to turn off. But hold on, I don't want it to turn off when I switch away. So now I have to have two macros set up. I have a macro that allows, well, my macros switch to any source that I want to, leaves this audio on, but then I have a separate one that I hit, boom, that will explicitly turn off the audio for there. It gets a little complicated, and you can't, until you start running it and doing it, you go, oh God, I have to set up a thing to do that. Oh my God, I have to set up a thing to do that. And you end up with a ton of macros. So that's just a little behind the curtains on how that works. Let me show you how these macros are set. So let's see here, the macro window is, there we go, under macros. And it brings up a whole separate little floating window. And you see I have a create and a run mode. So I go to create and let me find a blank slot in here because I don't want to mess anything up. And I hit this and I hit plus and I'll just call this temp. And I hit record and you see it says it's recording in here. And now I can change anything I want. So let's change the color. Let's just do it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build a macro to change the color of this. That was a really bad idea. Hold on a second. See, I'm already discovering this is a bad idea. Let me paste that, my original color source back in. It's still on the clipboard. That's okay. All right, that's all right. It's still on the clipboard. So I'm going to change the color there. All right, and then I'm going to stop. So that's all I've done. And I hit stop. So that's my little temp one. Now I'm going to set my color back to the way it was. Come here, you. Set my color back to the way it was. And let's load this view. Go back to the picture-in-picture. I go up here and I choose run. Let me zoom in on this. You can kind of see it in that little window there. It says run, yeah, you can see that. Recall and run is enabled, and that allows me to simply click this to activate it. So I click that, and it changes the color. I've just built that macro, right? But that's, again, that's all that macro is going to do. So let me fix this and get that back in there. So now, let's say I've done that macro, but now I need to alter it. So what I have to do is, let's go back to this big view, is I have to save the program. So I go save as. And you can see I've got a list of these, and I just name it. I click on it to grab the previous name, get rid of the date so that it's going to save today's date, and hit save. And it asks, what do I want to save into this? So I'm going to save everything. Go ahead and save everything. And that saves all the data, everything that has to do with the switcher is now saved into a backup file, a little text file. Super. And then, let's see, so that's done. It says save complete. So now I'm going to go into Text Wrangler because I want a pure raw text editor here. Open, and let's open the file that I just created. There's the one I just created. This is how I have to edit my macros. It is all XML. So for example, let's see here. Let's find that test one that I just did. I find test there. Nope, that's an old one. Test, bounce test, other tests. Here's the one I just did. So there's the macro that I just created. Let's zoom in on that a little bit for you. Name zoom test. No, that's not the one I did either. Darn it. Where's the one I just did? Test 2 test, Cam 6 color test. Got too many things called test. Is that what I called it? Did I call it tests? Oh, temp. I called it temp. That's why. Find temp. There it is. Okay, so here's the one that I just created. There it is. Let's zoom into that. And there. This is how it is. So camera control. It tells me which camera I'm controlling, the color bits, what I've changed on that, how I've changed it. All of that is in here in code. Totally easy to do, right? It's super intuitive. So what I will end up doing when I create a macro is I have to think through this in my head. Okay, when I switch to I'm going to record something that switches from A to B. But I want to make sure that when that happens, this microphone gets turned off, this one doesn't get turned off, this one explicitly is left on, whatever it might be. So I have to go in and I find previous instances of that code and copy and paste it in and save that out and load it back up into the macro pool. Isn't that crazy? That's how the whole switching thing is done. Now, you may recall when I did the video on the Epiphan Pearl 2, none of this existed. Basically, in that situation, you have the ability to set up the shot the way you want it, and you kind of save that as a snapshot, which arguably is a far, far easier way to do it. But it's also far less powerful. Now, for an average kind of live switching show, it is more than enough, and frankly, it is a better way to go. But given that this thing is not designed for people doing itty-bitty little YouTube TV shows, this is really designed for massive broadcasts, this is the kind of power that you need for that. So, you know, it is what it is. You've got all this great power of this thing, but with it comes an immense amount of complication and control and capabilities. But that's how that works. Let's see here. So now, let's see any comments that flew by. Yeah, let me scroll back. There's a few comments in here. I want to take a look at these. Confirming no sparkles, that's great. APN TV says, I must really learn how to use the macros. Yeah, APN TV, if you're using an ATEM, macros are absolutely. And what I'm going to show you next is going to make you really want to use the macros. Serge, hello, or Sergey, says, I second Sam Ariel. I don't know what Sam was saying. Oh, put yourself in a picture-in-picture when showing your PC. Oh, well, okay. So I can, but it would take me some time to set up. That's not something I can just quickly set up because I'd have to build a macro so I can switch back and forth and so on. You don't need to see me while you're seeing the screen. You got that. And besides that, I'd be covering part of it, but I could. All right, let's see here. What else do we got? More comments here, and then we're going to switch back to the show. Chris is saying, can I do the whole show in a sepia tone? No. All right, so that's that part of it. So I've built these macros. Now remember, let me get out of the macros, get out of this and zoom out of here. And we don't need that. I'm going to close that and not save that. Back to this, these macros are sitting over here. These are my little macros that I've created. If you look at these and go back to the first page of this, oops, there we go. You'll see it says things like main cam animation, main cam statics, that's my animated lower thirds, a static lower third, Mac only, Mac picture-in-picture, you're looking at the Mac only one right now, iOS only, I can trigger iOS audio on or off and so on. And the order of these may not make a whole lot of sense, but they make a lot more sense once you see this on my iPad. So all of these buttons here, if I was to trigger all the switching through here, I would have to move my mouse up to here and then click it, which obviously, I mean, I go into run, recall and run, move the mouse up here and click it, which is obviously not like it's, rocket science or anything. I mean, obviously I can move the mouse and click it, but it'd be much easier if I didn't have to move the mouse and click, if I could just click, well, enter the iPad. Right, on an iPad, obviously you have a touch interface. You touch it, it's more like a physical button interface. You just touch it to happen. You don't have to navigate the mouse to it to touch it. And believe me, when you're doing live like this and switching between a bunch of sources, you want it to be as simple and quick and intuitive as possible, right? So now I'm going to show you the switcher. So I've got my switching interface is this iPad right here. This is an old iPad. You can tell how old it is because of the connection point, the little 30 pin on there. This is where I'm running the software. The software that I use is called, I always forget the name, Strata Pro. Uh-oh. That was weird. Oh, because anyway. The software I'm using is called Strata Pro. Strata Pro is a third-party app. It's, as far as iOS apps goes, it's not very cheap, but considering how much you spend on the rest of this crap, it's a bargain. And it is an iOS interface to your ATEM. And it has, the vast majority of controls are in here, including the macros. So I'm going to show it to you on a different iPad because this iPad I can't control through here. But okay, that's up. Let's switch over to this. So this is what this interface looks like. And you can see the program and the preview. It's an iPad, so I can't point to it. But in the middle of the screen, you see it says program. So that's the out right now. iOS, you see is lit in red. That's what's live. Preview monitors down below. I can tap on previews and load up a different screen on the preview monitor. But as soon as I tap one of the top screens, that's what goes to the program. That's what I showed you before. But I don't need that. I need macros. So at the very top and near the middle, you'll see it says macros. I tap that. Hello, load the macros. There it goes. And it loads up these fancy little color chiclets that have all of those names on them, the same names that you saw before on the macros sheet. Now, what's really cool, yeah, wrong screen. What's really cool about this is the colors. When I first started using Strata, all the buttons were white, I guess. Yeah, they're all white. And I begged the guys who make Strata to please allow me to colorize the buttons. In fact, what I really, really want is a custom interface where I can have really big buttons, not these tiny little chiclets, but really big buttons that I can make the button look like anything I want. I can load a picture in there, so I could actually load a screenshot, a snapshot of this view, of that view, of the wide view, of whatever it might be, so that I can see that and very quickly reach over and tap on it. No, they haven't done that, but they did write in the code, because I asked, to allow colors on the buttons, which is really, really cool. And that also just lends itself, just points out the flexibility of this system. They didn't have to go back to Blackmagic to ask for it. They figured out a way to have me write something into the XML file, have users write something into that XML file, which Strata sees and then turns into a color button on here. So when we look at this, all these color buttons, they're color coded in a way that kind of sort of makes sense to me. But as you've seen, I do still make mistakes. I click the wrong ones. But top left there, it says main cam anim, animated, main cam static, and remote cam. So those are my 3 camera views that I will switch to. Then there's the 2 in yellow, Mac only and Mac picture in picture. And then the 3 green ones that are there, iOS only, iPhone plus guest, iPhone plus camera. And those are my iOS ones. And then the red ones control audio only. iOS audio on and off, chat audio on and off. So I have dedicated ones just for that. And then the last one's in white, open to the main camera and title fade. And that does, you may have noticed, usually when I'm doing these, I have cuts, like I just did, it just cuts between. But on those opening and closing ones, it can do a fade into the title or fade out of the title, that sort of thing. So all of those are there on color control. So for everyone who has ever watched the show and said, what are you controlling on your iPad? You're switching through your iPad. This is not running through the iPad. This whole switching thing is not done on the iPad. All the iPad is a fancy remote control. That's all the iPad is. It's just a fancy remote. So that, my friends, is how the switching is done. If there's interest, I could possibly do a whole video on actually configuring the switcher, but this isn't a super popular device, so I don't imagine it's the kind of video that a whole lot of people want to see. If it's something you want to see, let me know, and I'll plan something out and I'll do it, but otherwise it's not a show that I plan on doing. Okay, let's see here. So I think that's everything I need to show about switching, all the switching control, the switching shortcuts. Yes. Okay, now let's talk about local recording. So actually before we do that, let's just scroll back through the comments real quick. Let's see here. Faked Cube asking for recommendations on a polarizing filter. Dude, you know better than that. Save those questions for shows that are about those sorts of things. I don't want to go completely off. I want to try and stay on topic. I was getting way off topic on here. And APN TV says only using the light version of Strata. Yeah, I don't remember what the light version does or doesn't do versus the full version, but this full version, it's robust. It really is. So that is APN TV. That's why I was saying once I show you this, you're going to want to use the macros, because you have that control to just one touch trigger a macro, even color code them. So this is how I self-produce, right? This is how I am able to, while I'm doing the show, reach down and switch camera sources. You know, reach down and switch over to the remote camera there. Reach down and watch this. So I talked about delays. Normally, this is a wide camera. This is normally not set up this way. Normally, it'd be a tight camera or it'd be some other source. But as I tap on the main camera animation, I'm going to tap it. I'm going to count to 3 to tap it, and you'll notice there's a pause before it actually switches. And that is so that, now you see me on this view reaching out, but I want to minimize that. So for switching to the main camera, I'll tap it, and I have time to get my hand back before the switch actually happens. See? So that's little things like that are built into it. So I have little delays built in so that I have time to hit it. Now obviously you're going to see me reach out and hit the computer one, but then I'll go ahead and 3, 2, 1, 0 tap on that one, and it gives me time to get my hand back again. So yeah, just different little things we have in there. Okay, local recording. Let's go on to that. So I am locally recording. I have 2 different ways to do it. Actually, 3 technically, but 2 ways that I actually use. Put the battery in the right way. And the first one is what I used to always do, and that is using the Blackmagic, the Atomos Ninja Assassin. I already have a Ninja Assassin I've had for shooting in the field, yada yada, and I implemented that in here. And it's still here, but it is, let's set this up right. Are we live? We are live. Let's make sure that's, there we go, we can see that. Why am I not, oh, let's turn the display on so I can see. Excellent. We're not trying to record. Jeez. Switch over to, right, see like here, I don't have a macro. I took the macro out of this setup. I don't remember why, and I need to put it back in. So I don't have a macro to do this. That's why I have to switch to this GH5 manually. There we go. So there is the ATEM. And yes, it is upside down. Ooh, that's kind of cool. Look at that. Ooh, oh, neat. That's cool. Oh, sorry. So that is there to record. That HDMI cable that's coming in is coming in from the switcher. That is the program out, and that's basically all there is to it. So that shows me the program, and I can record it, right? Because that's what the Ninja does. The thing is that I discovered a long time ago that I was getting these weird glitches in the recording, and I thought it was my Ninja Assassin. So I sent it to them for service, and they did a bunch of analysis, couldn't figure it out. We went back and forth a bunch. Finally, they said, we have no idea what's wrong with it. We're going to send you a brand new unit. It's cool. Thanks, guys. So they send me a brand new unit, plug it in, the exact same thing happens. And of course, before that, I'd swapped out cables and done everything I could on this end. And I'm talking to Blackmagic about it, and they're going, that's not our problem, right? But then finally they tell me the thing that I have come to learn about Blackmagic. As much as I do love their gear, because there's some awesome gear and it is relatively very inexpensive, and I emphasize relatively because it's only relative because you look at companies like AJA who make phenomenal gear, but it costs 2 to 4 times the price. The thing is that the Aja stuff works with basically everything. Blackmagic, it kind of just works with Blackmagic stuff. Sometimes you might get lucky and it works with something else, but for the most part, it works with Blackmagic stuff. So Blackmagic said, buy a Blackmagic recorder. So that's what I did. So my Blackmagic recorder is much simpler. Let's go back to this view. That is that guy there. And that, oh come on, that is a simple little recorder. It only does 1080p. It's really inexpensive, so that's great. But it only does 1080p. You see it's got an SSD drive in it. And that is where I record this show. So you saw the red light on there. It's recording. I forget what this thing is called. Something Duo. HyperDeck Shuttle. Right, that screen's the deal. HyperDeck Shuttle 2. So that's recording. That only does 1080p. The Atomos does 4K. So if I'm doing a 4K program, if I'm doing something for a client and I'm doing it in 4K recording for editing later, I will record to that. Anyway, for the live shows, it just gets recorded to that. So that's how it's recorded locally. And I should always, but sometimes I forget, record this show, the live show, as a backup there. Ideally, the live show that gets streamed to YouTube stays on YouTube. YouTube allows us to trim the beginning and the end off the show, but we've gotten, well, I say we, but I mean Ryan, has gotten really good at ending the broadcast at just the right time so he doesn't have to trim it anymore, which is fantastic. So that means once the show's over from here, it's on YouTube, it's done. But if there's a glitch, if something happens on the YouTube side, the file is screwed up, ideally I have a backup here. I used to just pull that one down and replace it because I can sweeten the audio, I can make it sound a little bit better. But we've got, you know what, it's good enough. It's not worth the extra time and hassle. Okay, so that's recorded there. That's that part. That's easy. Next is streaming. And before I get into that, let me just scroll back through the comments once again. Let's see here. Apple Cast Pod says, I have earned crazy nerd cred today with MacroScript, right? Tell me about it. That stuff will make your eyes bleed. Silly saying, use one of my Amazon links. Oh, you're talking about, okay, you're having another discussion. Yes, please, whenever possible. If you're going to buy anything, scroll down. There's links to all this stuff for where possible to B&H and Amazon and Adorama so that you know, you guys can choose where you want to shop and I can still get a little affiliate cred. Okay, so that's that part of it. All right, now we talk about streaming. Okay, remember, everything goes into the ATEM, and then there's a program out. And the program out is what you see. That is the final output. That's the output source. The ATEM has multiple program outs, which is insanely cool. So one of them is going into this guy. One of them is coming in, well, into that recorder. It actually goes through this thing. So you can see programs coming into here, and then it goes back out of here. It loops around and loops into the recorder over here. But then one of them has to go to something that's going to stream it. So the program out can be HDMI or SDI, depends on what you're doing, so that's fine. Okay, so you got a program out. Now you've got a single source, a single output. My show lives here, and now I can plug this into anything that will encode it and stream it out. So by separating the two, you have this ability to choose any kind of encoding solution that you want, which is kind of cool, right? All it is coming out of here. So let's go through some of the things that I have tried. I talked about Wirecast before. Wirecast as a software solution does all this crazy switching and the encoding. It does everything. But as I kind of ranted about a little bit in the first show, mildly unreliable. Version 7 way better, but that ship has sailed. as a complete switching and encoding solution. I'm going to loop back around it because I actually am using it for the encode that you're watching right this very moment. We're going to show that to you. But once I discarded Wirecast, before I came back to it, I tried all kinds of different things. And the most successful, but still not most reliable, solution was the Teradek VidiU Pro. The VidiU Pro is a hardware device, a little box, $1,000 for this thing, and it'll encode up to 1080p 60, out to just about any streaming service you want. So it has built-in use for Facebook and, well, they added Facebook once Facebook Live came around, built in for YouTube, built in for, I don't know, Stream, I don't know, there's a bunch of them. I don't even know what they are anymore, but there's a bunch of different streaming services out there. And so ideally you go in through either a web interface, through the interface on the box itself. I have a whole video that I did about the VidiU Pro, we'll link to that up here as well. It talks about how that works. You can control it from your phone. It's a cool device. One of the coolest things about the VidiU Pro is that I can use it here in the studio with a wired, hardwired Ethernet connection or Wi-Fi connection, or I can use the cellular connection on my phone to connect to it and stream. So when I'm traveling, that was something that I will use to stream. I'll take a camera, plug it into the VidiU Pro, and stream live. I don't have all the switching, but it's a camera in. The thing is, the video doesn't care what it's getting. It just gets a signal over HDMI and outputs it to however you want. Unfortunately, I had so many issues with the VidiU, it would stop. The quality would drop. It would just kind of freak out on me. It was so frustrating. So I eventually gave up. I eventually tried other things again. And I ended up circling back to Wirecast. Now, what's really neat about streaming live to YouTube, and this is unique to YouTube from things that I've seen, is in YouTube you have a complete control window. So what I'm going to do now is switch over. We're going to a little bit of a tunnel effect happening here, but we're going to switch over and we're going to see my system out in the other room that Ryan is currently managing. Now, Ryan watches this show. He will trigger the final foursquare that comes up at the very end of this. Ideally, technically, that's all he has to do. But he is monitoring the chat. He's making sure that anybody who's being obnoxious gets tossed out of here. He is making sure that my bandwidth is always clean, and if there's any problems, he can let me know. There's not a whole lot we can do about it, but if he sees a problem, then he knows, oh, we better check and make sure that an upload didn't kick off, some backup didn't kick off, or whatever. So he's monitoring all that. And the system that we've got set up is set up, and as I said that, he just went up to make sure that Backblaze wasn't turning off, because I can see that because I'm watching his screen now. It's on a 5K iMac with a second screen that's vertical, so we have a nice big long window. So let me just show you what he sees. So now we're going to get that tunneling effect. Let's see here. You're seeing, the magnifying glass. So I'm not controlling his screen. So this is Wirecast right here. Wirecast is bringing in the program. This right here, this window right here is showing the program input. And that program input is going from an SDI cable out of the ATEM into one of these guys, Blackmagic Ultra Studio Mini Recorder, that goes SDI in, Thunderbolt out, Thunderbolt into the Mac. Wirecast sees this as a source, and just like the VidiU that just takes this as a source, it is just one input in, and that's all that is needed. So let's go back to this. So that is this screen here. This is the foursquare that will come up afterwards. So this is a little 21-second long animation. All it is it shows these four squares, it plays some music, and then after the show is over, Ryan goes in and he adds in 4 pieces of information. There's the automatically selected for your viewer show here. There's a playlist that comes up here, the subscribe button, and then something random we drop in on that side. So those are what comes up at the end. Over here, he's monitoring the chat. So this is the live chat. He's monitoring this. You can see that's him logged in. So if I can zoom into this, it's going to be a bit pixely, but that's him logged in. See there, he says, "Hi guys," and that is him as an admin, so he can do whatever he has to do. Over here, we see the actual program. So Ryan, click on Manage for me. Let's go back to that view over here, and click on here so that people can see the dual stream. There we go. So here we're seeing a preview, right? That's the preview monitor. This is what YouTube is receiving, and this is the public view, what is being sent out. So YouTube provides this, so it's this really good interface on here. It tells me how many people are currently watching, how many watch time, and so on. And then right here, this is the critical one. Right here, it says stream status good. That's what we want to see. If that drops, we know we've got a problem. It tells me here how long we've been live, and so on. Go ahead and switch back to analytics, Ryan. So it switches to analytics, and now we see a little bit more information. The chat rate, how many chats per minute, how many people have watched total, concurrent viewers, and so on. So this is all data here, and we can see here bandwidth, who's watching at what bandwidth, and so on. All kinds of really good statistics in here. So all of that is not required. I can run the show without him doing that. I can, because that's a web interface, I could actually just do it from a little Mac that I have an old MacBook Air that sits here. It's barely capable of doing anything anymore, but it is monitoring, it is watching that analytics. Actually, it should be. I clicked on the wrong one. It is monitoring the analytics. I can see my stream quality here as well, and I can at a glance just see how many people are watching. That's pretty much all that I use that for, because remember, my chat feed is over here on a separate screen. But it means that I could start and stop the show from here as well. So effectively what we do is the feed goes from the ATEM, again, through out SDI, through this, into the Mac, into Wirecast. I pre-build the show. Every live show, except when I'm in the field. When I'm in the field, it's different. But every live show when I'm here is pre-built. And that way it can get promoted by YouTube up to a week in advance. You can find it. I can send you the link to it. The show exists. And it'll tell you, this show will be live in 3 days, or whatever it is. In that control room that you just saw with the two windows, that's where we see the feed that's coming in, but we haven't sent the feed yet, right? So in Wirecast, again, we have my program out coming from this into there. In Wirecast, you load up the interface, and within Wirecast, you can actually see the programs that were built in YouTube. So I go, okay, there's today's show, tomorrow's show, the next show, whatever. So I select today's show and hit stream and hit go. And at that point, it starts encoding and streaming to YouTube, but YouTube will only, at this point, it's only taking it into the preview. We haven't actually started the live show yet. And you can, in Wirecast, say, go live automatically. So the moment that I hit start streaming, it actually tells YouTube to go ahead and take this live. But because we have multiple steps here, we have multiple people involved, we have more control over it, so we don't do it that way. We go ahead and send the live stream to YouTube. Within YouTube, we can preview the live stream. That's what that preview window is. We can see it. It is a fact. It is coming through. Everything looks good, sounds good. We're all thumbs up. We're ready to go. And then when it's time, when we're ready, Ryan hits the go live button, and that's when you start to see the show. And he's out there giving me a countdown. He's got 10 minutes to go, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds. Then he goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and then at 5 he goes quiet, and I know in 5 seconds, boom, I'm live. And that's how we control all that. And then at the end of the show, when I say thank you very much, goodbye, and I stare at the screen, and okay, so I'm looking, and I'm giving Ryan time to load up that Foursquare. So what he's doing is he knows, because I'm wrapping the show, he's got his finger on the button, he's ready to go. As I get to that point and I say thank you very much and goodbye, and I shut up and stare at the screen, he immediately hits that button. It does a cross dissolve over to that Foursquare, and it plays that 21-second long animation. Why 21 seconds? Because YouTube allows us to put a 20-second end card, so we have time for the dissolve to finish, and then the end cards, whatever, dissolve in, and they're there for 20 seconds, the max duration that they can be. Meanwhile, Ryan's watching this. At the end of the 20 seconds, he hits stop stream. That cuts the stream off, and ideally, timing right, it's perfect on the receiving end as well. And that is all there's to easy, right? That's all there's to it. It's like super easy to do. That's the live show. That's the live setup. That's how we do it. It's insane, but it's true. All right, back into the comments. Any questions you got, throw them out now if you haven't already, because this is the chance to do them. Samuel is asking, when using the GH4 for streaming, do you take the line out from the mixer to the mic input on the GH4? And do I get electrical interference? Okay, so first of all, no, I've never gotten interference that way. I don't do that. If I was doing that, then, oh, I see what you're saying. From the mixer into the camera, would I get interference? You might. If you're just going into the mini, so you'd be adapting from XLR to the mini, you might. This has... Well, if you're using the XLRs, you might. I would probably try going from the quarter, because it has quarter-inch plugs as well, output into a mini jack. And if that's still overdriving it, which maybe that's the problem, it's overdriving it, then you would want to go into, I don't have it here, but you'd want to get, well, shoot, on a GH4, it requires the whole YAG to have the XLR inputs. On the GH5, you could go into the XLR inputs on there. But I think you'd probably, if it's overdriving it, you would go through an attenuator. An attenuator is a device that sucks out some of the power. So on yesterday's show, I talked about this because I have my program out, audio out, coming out of the mixer back into another, out of the ATEM, back into a little tiny mixer here and going into my ears so that I can hear the program, which I I'm not on today again because I'm moving around too much. But the signal coming out of the ATEM is too strong. It overdrives the mixer, so I have an attenuator on there that drops it by, I forget how many volts, but it drops the signal so that the little mixer can handle it. So that might be what you need if you're running interference running into the camera. I do not run into the camera directly for reasons that I explained in Monday's show, probably yesterday's as well, because it was all audio and video together. So watch those two shows and you'll understand why. It has to do with sync and self-monitoring. All right, other questions. Chris Fenwick is saying, brilliant. Why, thank you, sir. You do an absolute amazing job. Why, thank you, Chris. Look at that. He can be nice even after I call him old. By the way, NAB, guys, if you're going to NAB, Tuesday morning, we're going to have a little meetup, a little group gathering. Shoot me a message through PhotoJoseph.com or through Joseph.info page. Just type in Joseph.info, it takes you there. Shoot me a message so that I have your email address, and I will email you with a location. But it's going to be a 9 a.m. Tuesday morning NAB meetup where you will get to meet my friend Chris Fenwick. With any luck, he's super busy, but he's going to try and make it. Anyway, he says, I do an amazing job, and I wish I had a similar setup. Yeah, it's fun to do. Also, your images look fantastic, and the show sounds great. So it's funny, yesterday we were talking audio, right? And I said, I'm on the lav today because of all the bouncing around. Normally I would be on the boom mic, which I know doesn't sound as good, but it's a lot more convenient. And then I went to the Heil 1, whichever, the Heil PR40, everybody said, use the Heil. And, I'd love to use the Heil all the time, but I can't because I'm moving around. But then I went back and listened to it, God, the lav really does sound better. Should I just go with the lav all the time? I mean, I don't know, maybe I should. You guys tell me. Maybe I should just go with the lav all the time. I know it does sound better. It does. APNDB says, thanks, great explanation. So it sounds like you find Wirecast more reliable than the VidiU, but it needs an extra computer to run it. Precisely. So Wirecast now, with Wirecast 7, is more reliable. But even there, okay, so in Wirecast, let me see if I can do I even have Wirecast on this system? Oops. Let me see here. I want to see if I can bring it up on this system. It won't be part of the stream. And I want to show you something in there about Wirecast. Yeah, this works. Okay. Don't need that. Let's make this full screen. And go into the settings. Yeah, okay, let's get out of full screen. It didn't like that. Don't go full screen on Wirecast and then open the settings. It's a bad idea. Okay, completely tiny little window freaks out and goes huge. Come on. You go away. There we go. Okay. Let's bring up the Mac. So this is Wirecast, just the generic interface. I'm going to bring up the output settings where I can choose what it would be. So let's go to YouTube, hit OK, and let me make this window a little smaller here. We don't need this huge thing. Okay, here in the YouTube, you have your encoding presets. I am using right now this one, 1080p, zoom into that a little bit. 1080p X264 encoder, 4.5 megabit. You notice they all say recommended, like that's supposed to help. Okay, so that's what I'm currently using. There we go. So when I had the Pearl 2, the Epiphan Pearl 2 in here, Epiphan recommended a 6 megabit stream to YouTube, and I've got the bandwidth for that, for this, no problem. And it works, it was beautiful, and the stream quality was better. Fantastic, okay, great, so 6 megabit, yeah, let's do 6. So I look back in here, and if you scroll up a little bit farther, let's see here. Oh, it's not 1080p 30, it's 1080. No, I guess that is what I'm using. Yeah, that is what I'm using. Okay, and then here you go, 1080p 30, Apple H264 encoder. So not the X264, but the Apple H264 at 6 megabit. Super, so I try that, and unfortunately, that was massively unreliable. You'd hit stream and it would just say no signal received on the other end in Wirecast. So some Wirecast say no signal received. You'd see weird errors in Wirecast itself. God, okay, back down to the 4.5 megabit, no problem. So then I go, okay, well there's two encoders, right? There's the X264 and there's the Apple H264 encoder. So I modified the preset using the X264 to take it up to 6 megabit, and that worked brilliantly for like 2 days, and then it started dying as well. So for some reason, I cannot get a reliable 6 megabit stream out of Wirecast. I don't know why, but if I go to 6 megabit, it don't like it. I would much rather be a 6 megabit. It makes for a better quality image for you guys, but it won't do it. It is totally unreliable. So I'm back to the basic built-in default 4.5 megabit preset. As long as I stay there, I have no problems. you do have to watch out, and this is regardless what device you're using, you do have to watch out for other uploads going on. I've got 30 meg up, and even there, if I'm pushing 4.5 meg up from this, and with my 30 meg pipe, if I've got anything else going on the network, any Backblaze backup or anything else happening, forget about it. It's gonna choke it. So we have to go through, that's part of the morning routine. About 15 minutes before showtime, make sure that Backblaze isn't going, cut everything, no Dropbox syncing, cut everything off. So, a little tedious, but there we go. Okay. Next up, Chris is saying faster together stage. faster, I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're talking about, Chris, but thank you. Yes, use the lav. Yes, use the lav. Chris, you think so? Okay, use lav for sure. Everybody says use the lav. Sully says you love it when I says on the YouTubes. You know, it's kind of like the interwebs. It's all good. That's it. Okay, so the vote is to use the lav. Maybe I'll have to start doing that. It's just one more thing to set up in the morning, because obviously I got to turn it on, turn it off, hook it up, wire it up. But apparently it sounds better. Okay. What do you guys think? Are y'all going to go out and build one of these now? I'll build one of these for you. Seriously, anybody watching this who wants to hire me to consult on building this thing, I'll be happy to do it. Happy to help. Pay me, obviously, but I'll be happy to help. It's complicated as hell. It really is. And it's taken me a long time to get it up and running as clean as it is, but it is. Oh yeah, Sam is saying Wirecast, the free Wirecast is called Wirecast Play for YouTube. Yeah, there is a free version of Wirecast that just does YouTube. I bought the Wirecast long before that because I was doing the other show. I was doing it initially 3 years, so I had to have the full version. But yeah, I guess the free version probably does it. I don't know. I don't know if it has, I know it just does YouTube. I don't know if it's missing anything else that I need. But I'm really like barely using Wirecast these days, but it's there. Okay, right, and Ryan's saying, or there's the budget studio setup we did for Grow Baby. Right, that's right. So we'll link to that up here. We might be running out of links right now, but if it's not a link up here when I'm pointing, then scroll down, we'll put it down there. But I did a budget live streaming setup for a client, and the majority of the money in there went into treating the room so it sounds good, and then we had a video camera, lighting, good microphone, and so on. But it's not multiple switching. It's a camera and then switches to her computer, so it's 2 sources and that's it. So a much simpler setup, but it's a great live streaming setup. Super duper. Okay. I guess that's it. I think we're going to go out and get out of here. It is Friday, folks. I hope that means that you are going to go out and enjoy yourself. It is, I'm hoping the sun comes out, but it's, you know what I really want to do? I want to hook up because I need more cameras. I want to hook up a camera outside to show like the outside view. So I kind of start the show with, look at how beautiful of a day it is, and then sometimes just whiteout conditions, and I don't know, it'll be fun. Like just, one of those things, just opening the show. I'm working on the format of the show, playing with it, tweaking it. All right, guys, Monday is the other live Q&A session, so let me see if I can bring that up here. We're gonna do a Q&A on Monday morning. That would be this session here. That'll be that session. That is Monday morning's Q&A, where I answer all your hard questions that you have thrown at me over the last 2 weeks, because this Monday I skipped it because I was in Washington. So we'll do that on Monday. And Tuesday, I think my Tuesday show queued up is my vlogging, in-car vlogging setup. It's kind of a fun thing I set up one day, and I did a whole little recording around it, and I'll talk about that. So I think that's on Tuesday. Anyway, so that's that. Hey, have a good weekend. You know the routine. If you liked the video, thumbs up it. If you didn't, don't thumbs down it. Just don't watch. Now, if you got a thumbs down it, give me a reason why. Subscribe, hit the Patreon. I'll make that thing pop up down here if you want to contribute to the show. If you're watching this live, of course, you still have a few minutes left. If you love the show, you learned something, you can hit that little dollar button down there and throw a buck in the tin. And if you want to contribute to the show on a regular basis, just click this guy right here. Well, you can't click it, but go to this guy right here, PhotoJoseph.com/Patreon, and that'll take you to my Patreon page. Otherwise, that's it. We're good. Have yourselves a fabulous weekend, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.